We would get along good, because I only like the cake.
should see how that
Yeah, so
goes.
take it a piece, yes.
People are scraping the frosting off.
Really, I only like the cake.
The cameras and microphones are on.
So we'll call this meeting to order. And I guess my first question is the first thing on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Have we been saying that at every meeting? 'Cause
I
if-
think we started last time.
Okay, so I guess we'll stand and say the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. And third thing on the agenda is agenda approval. I normally ask if there's any changes to the agenda. If there is none, if I can get a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Shar. Number 4, public input. Oh, excuse me, pardon me. I guess we got to go back to vote for the approval of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. As you can tell, I'm trying to move this baby along. Okay, consent agenda, seeing as there's no public input. Any changes to the consent agenda? If not, I'll get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Minutes. Yeah, that, good thing I got this, because I got a note in here. There's one that got Steve's name as making the motion, that was actually me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, that wasn't the motion, it was the voting, yeah. Let me get to the minutes. There's a correction. Hold on. You got the minutes up front? Maybe where Steve was, yeah, they opposed.
Oh, so the one right before 7, under new business, the one right before
Just
that?
above the new business bold, the opposed was actually me.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good catch, thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't in attendance, so I wouldn't be approving the
Well, good
minutes.
thing I put it on my note here, because I didn't remember it until it flashed up there.
So Steve, your motion would be to, with those amended minutes, thank you.
That's correct.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Shar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Old business.
We have the audit drafted, and a copy was in your packets, and we have Rob from Miller McDonald here to help present that information. So I will ask if you want to come up to the front, Rob, and
Thanks for sitting through the last meeting. It took a little longer than planned.
When I got here and I saw everybody, I was like, oh, man.
They were all here for you.
Yeah, that was my thought.
This earlier.
I'm sorry?
So we could have done this earlier.
Yeah.
Know more about lodging.
Clear a room like no one.
Wanted to know, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, so is it okay if I get started? Yeah, so my name is Robert Maher. I'm an auditor at Miller McDonald, and I worked on the Hubbard HRA audit for 2023, and I'm just going to kind of go through our audit report, and at the end I can answer any questions that anybody might have. One of the things that we always stress when we kind of go through these things is that you'll only see certain pages of the report that have Miller McDonald letterhead, and these are your financial statements. We audit the financial statements and we prepare them, but ultimately you accept responsibility for the financial statements. And so if you go to page 2, this is our report, and the report, I'm not sure if everybody read it, but it kind of lays out the different sections, and the one that everybody's always most concerned about is in the opinions paragraph or section, the second paragraph, and in our opinion, the financial statements referred to present fairly in all material respects. the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities in each major fund. And so there's, you know, an unmodified opinion, which is what you want. So it lays out in the back there our responsibilities, and we feel that we met our responsibilities. And it also lays out the responsibilities of management. You know, really if you then flip to the back of the report, because this is a government audit, a yellow book audit. Let me see what page it is. Page 27, we also do a report on Minnesota legal compliance. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with the Minnesota Legal Compliance Guide, and we do testing around that during the course of the audit. And our opinion really, when we were doing our testing for the Minnesota legal compliance, if you were to refer to items 2023-7 and 2023-8 in the back, there were two findings related to Minnesota legal compliance, and they're listed in the back there. And then if you were to go to page 29, we also do some testing around internal control. And on page 30, we have our findings listed on internal control. And we identified 4 material weaknesses and 2 significant deficiencies. And you know, I can just read quickly. A material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented or detected and corrected. So a significant deficiency is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control that is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance. And then again, as I was saying, starting on page 31, you know, we really have those things listed. And you know, one last thing that we always you know, kind of say about our opinion is that the audit provides reasonable assurance, which is a relatively high level of assurance, but it's not absolute. So we work with materiality levels in our auditing, and attached to the letters that you received, this should have been in your PDF. There's our management letter, and in the back of it, we have our listing of material audit adjustments and our uncorrected misstatements. So that's essentially our audit report. So
I did read through it, and I noticed a lot of these deficiencies. There was corrective acts, or how do I want to promote, things of how to correct it, and that we are going to be doing that, agreeing to do all that stuff. I'm assuming too, maybe we had one management group at the beginning of the year and a second management group towards the end of the year. I'm assuming that gave you some challenges. Can you address that?
yeah, so you know, the general timeline. So you know, we're going back to 2023, and the HLDC. Roughly June, I think, is when their contract ended with the HRA, and then it was subsequently moved to the HRDC. And also as part of that, the HRDC subcontracted with D.W. Jones to begin managing, you know, what I describe as really the 4 main properties: Meadowview, Meadow Edge, Regency, and Cornerstone. And you know, that transition period, I think what we saw in the financial statements was, you know, sort of a difficult time trying to figure out the organization. There's you know, 3 different funds, there's loan pools, there's different properties, and you know, I think that period of time during that transition, you know, probably created some issues. You know, for the organization, for financial reporting, so.
I guess it kind of speaks to the benefit of a long-term relationship with a management company.
Yeah, you know, you have to get to know the organization, you know, where the properties are, the rent structure, the different software that you work with. It's, you know, even the coding for the accounting is a little bit different in fund accounting, because you have your general fund, you have your Merle fund, and you have your you could call it your enterprise fund, the rentals, the big buildings. And so, you know, you're not just coding insurance expense, you're coding it to fund 3, insurance expense, and then you're putting it to Meadowview, Meadows Edge, Regency, the different properties. And so, if you're not familiar with the chart of accounts or the operation, that can be difficult. You can make mistakes, and we, if you were to look at the material audit adjustments that we make, you'll see quite a bit of that, and it's actually some of the findings that we have as well, is that there was a lot of activity that was coded to the wrong project. And when I say project, that could be one of the loans, or it could be one of the properties. And then also coding that activity to the wrong fund. So property taxes, for example, is gonna be in Fund 30, because that's where all your properties are. If you see, you know, $20,000 in property taxes in the general fund, when the general fund doesn't own any real estate, that's kind of you know, that's not correct. So, yeah.
So I'm looking at page 45. Adjusting journal entries due to or from D.W. Jones, Cornerstone, Regency, et cetera. We already know that D.W. Jones owes quite a bit of money back. Are these a listing of the dollars that were overpaid to D.W. Jones that they owe?
Did you say page 45?
It's our page 45.
Oh, in the-
Maybe
So-
page,
So it's in,
It's in the adjusting entries, the last
yeah, the last.
okay,
5 pages,
okay.
third
Yeah,
page from
so
the
it'll be,
back.
Adjusting entry 220.
Adjusting entry 220. So, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Well, I do know that D.W. Jones owes us money because there were mistakes made, okay?
Okay.
Is this a listing of the dollars that D.W. Jones owes the HRA?
So, I've watched the meeting minutes, for your meetings. We're required to read the minutes, whether they were during the time period that we audited or subsequent, and make notes about it. We analyze them for subsequent events. And so I heard your discussion the other day about D.W. Jones owing the HRA money. And when I first heard that, one of the questions that I had was, you know, I audited up until December 31st of 2023. Is there something that's happened in the last year that's creating that balance? So as it sits today, if D.W. Jones owes the HRA money, it could have been from transactions that took place after our audit timeframe.
Okay, so you've done all the adjustments.
For December 31st, 2023, yes. And so when I received the unadjusted trial balance to begin the audit, there was an amount on there labeled due to from, I want to say D.W. Jones, or it could have said cash prior management. So no, it's D.W. Jones, and then for the different properties. And it was a large balance. I initially thought that it was maybe some type of a loan or something along those lines. And after doing our confirmations, it was obvious that it was an erroneous balance, that the balance shouldn't have been there. And so, kind of, again, doing our reconciliations, it was discovered that these balances were a result of erroneous entries that needed to be cleaned up. there were quite a few different things kind of going on with the entries that were creating issues, is the way I would put it, so.
There are some instances, even from 2023, where the HRA paid for some expenses related to the properties out of their general fund.
Yes.
And D.W. Jones also paid them out of the resources that they've been using. So technically, it's not to D.W. Jones, it's
Yes.
to yourselves.
Yes.
And there's some cash that D.W. Jones is holding that is yours, that is due back to the general fund. But it's not D.W. Jones that owes you the money, it's your own money
Yes.
that is in there.
What that they're holding.
That they're holding, and so the part of that is where we can document that the expenses were paid double, then we can get back and, look at how does that impact, because as you recall, our contract that we just signed with them has a clause where they need to return excess resources. Jeff and I need to get together with them and figure out
What that
how to
means.
calculate that,
Yeah.
and then how to get that returned so that we have the ability for those properties to start paying the general fund back. But I just want to be clear that it's not really D.W. Jones that owes you money.
Yeah.
It's money
Yeah.
that they hold because of double payments. And we'll work through that. We're getting closer to, this will help. And then we're getting closer to getting 2024. I've actually gotten through 3 bank accounts reconciled. Yay, woo, yes. So we'll be able to then start having those conversations and figure out what's a reasonable balance for them to have on hand so that they can accomplish and operate the way they need to and don't have to necessarily ask us to give them general fund loans. But then how can we get that so that we can put that money back in play? So,
Thank you. So, and then I have one more question, and this is to Jeff. So this, we have to have the HRA, EDA done for the county audit. So how does this play into where the county's at? And I know this is for 2023.
Well, the county audit that isn't done is for 2023 as well. So this
Yes.
plays, this
But is this
plays,
part of the reason that we're in delay?
it is,
Getting it done
yes,
in a timely manner?
yes, and it's, and it's not the only reason.
Okay. And I'm not blaming you. I know 2023 was really challenging here, but.
I think we saw, draft financial reports from the OSA about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the audit is in review, and they will be getting back to us for follow-up items before they can complete the audit. When I talked to the lead yesterday, he said he figures completion at this point, because he knows we're presenting this today, would be about mid-January. So we're not far from having it done, but
Are we
yes.
going to be penalized?
I hope not. I don't think so, but I hope not.
Alrighty. Is there any other questions for Robert? And does Robert have anything more to present to us?
No. If there are any other questions, you can let Mary know, and I'd be happy to send written responses or talk with Mary over the phone, so.
You should eat cake.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a little on the way out. I saw that.
After sitting through all that.
Got an education on lodging taxes.
Well, now you got something to talk about over the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert.
thank you, Rob, and thank Josh too for all of the hard work and heavy lifting you did on this one.
Yep, absolutely. We can start 2024 pretty soon, right?
Yes, we'll be ready. We
Okay,
will
cool.
be ready.
Alrighty. With that, I guess we're on to new business.
Do we need a motion to?
We
accept
do
that?
need to officially accept
Okay.
the audit report as presented.
Could I get a motion? Thank you, Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now new business. Yeah, this is my first time.
I did include the information from the 4 properties. It has been fairly uneventful over the last little bit here, so that's good to note. We did have an issue where the Meadows Edge did need some cash flow. And then the other issue that they've had as well is, last month, you may recall that we approved getting the trees cut down. When they went back to follow up with the vendor has not fulfilled their agreement and has not shown up. So they are working to try and identify another vendor who would be able to cut the trees. So those expenses have not been occurred. And then we also, in the packet, did get the cornerstone, the difference between what the insurance is gonna cover and what we had to cover on that one really bad apartment. That has been done, we're ready to lease it, and MHFA has cleared the finding. So the building is now back in compliance, so, and there is a tenant identified. So they should be moving in this month, meaning that Cornerstone will have all 9 units filled again.
Was that the 11,000 some odd dollar figure? Okay. That's what I
Yeah.
kind of figured.
Yeah, to DW Jones. So what would they, in the packet of checks, there's a listing of about 10 different invoices that amount covers.
Okay.
And that's what that's for.
One question back to that tree. Check has been made out and then it's already been signed. Are you gonna void that check then?
DW Jones will pay the vendor, so we sent money over to them. They'll hold it until they identify a vendor. And then we'll see that in the cash returns. And so I'm spending more time now looking, when we get the financials, looking at where they're at. I brought it up last month, and we're gonna still need to figure out how to get a little bit quicker data so that we have a better understanding on where their cash flow is on a month-to-month basis. But we're getting there. I think that we're starting to get the processes and procedures ironed out between the way that DW Jones operates and then the way that we need it for timelines in order to make sure that we have the meetings up to date.
Just that a new
so.
vendor might be more or less.
And so then what would happen is that it would sit in that bank account, and it would be additional resources. So then that comes into that play is, okay, we gave you extra resources, you didn't spend it all. Now if you don't need it for operating, then we need to return it. And so that's that whole conversation about, how do we determine what they need for operations? And then how do we determine how much they pay back to us? It's supposed to be quarterly. With the lag between when they have their financials and when we have our meeting, we can't set it here. So we need something that's a little bit more automatic, and then we do need to understand really what the ebb and flow of their cash needs are. I do have some questions about what their cash needs are, so I need to meet with them to figure out a little bit more on how they're booking and what their cash needs are before we firmly set that return number, because I don't wanna get a certain amount back and then have to turn around and pay it right back again, because that doesn't benefit anybody. But I also think that the HRA can be better stewards of their own money and should be better stewards of their own money, so I don't want anything more than has to be in the DW Jones there. So there's a balancing act that we'll have to come up with, and getting through this audit getting the 2024 financials done and getting through, starting to get through that audit. And then just being able to sort of work through all of those things as quickly as we can is gonna be the key over the next couple months here, so.
Have a clean slate for 2025.
Yes, yes, absolutely, yeah.
All righty, let's see. Do we need to approve the financials from D.W. Jones?
You don't have to, but if you want to, you can.
Well, if not, then I guess we'll just move on to 7B, Minnesota Department of Revenue notice.
So, as we've been working through all of this information, and the financials, we discovered that there was, well, let me back up. We got a letter not that long ago, I think it actually went to Jeff, and said that, the Department of Revenue is going to take your federal payments, as a result of not reporting and not paying employment taxes. So we did a little bit of research in what we could find and did find a letter that was issued in October of 2023, in which there was a notice that tax returns, and we're talking withholding tax returns, payroll taxes, were not reported, the reports were not filed, and potentially some of the payments weren't made. And there was an amount owing based on a commissioner-generated report that was paid back in October of 2023. However, we can't find any documentation that any of the reports, the letter clearly says that this is not exempting you from doing the reports. It's just your penalty for not doing them. And your reports are still due. We can't find any documentation that they were actually done. So we received another letter, just recently with another, well, this time it was a threat that the federal tax payments are going to be withheld or taken, and then that several reports are still unfiled or delinquent. So I tried to call the Department of Revenue, and even with what we had, they wouldn't talk to me. But what I did say is, I suspect that this is what the case is. And he didn't say yes or no, but he did sort of allude to that I was on the right track. But he strongly suggested that we complete a power of attorney in order to provide HLDC, primarily myself, the ability to discuss with them how to get these returns done. Equal or whatever, we can't find any payroll records for 23. So, and we know, based on just what we know, that there were employees during this time frame. We don't know when, the HRA used an organization called iSolve to process payroll. It's a membership or a fee-based program. We're not sure when or how the fee was discontinued with that organization. Once you discontinue it, you don't get access to the records, the data. So we think that we're going to have to pay them something to get some sort of temporary access so we can get in there, download all of the payroll reports that we need in order to complete the filing. I also suspect that Minnesota is the only one who have said anything. We also believe that the unemployment reports haven't been done, and neither have the federal tax reports. So we really need to get to those payroll reports so that we can accurately report the payroll reports that are missing from all of these jurisdictions, and then make sure that the withholding taxes are then deposited as required. The HRA stopped having employees in 2023. And if you did notice in the audit, there does show to be a tax liability. Well, you shouldn't have a tax liability because they should have all been paid in 2023.
I know that's one of the questions the HRA board had. They're wondering on some of the reports, when we don't have employees, how come I don't remember exactly what the line items were, but I remember that statement being made is that, well, if we don't have any employees, then how come we've got this line item here with a dollar figure attached to it?
It was from when you did have employees that weren't paid and reported in a timely fashion. So that's what it is. And in 2023, there was a $1,500 payment that was made as a penalty, but subsequent to that, no more reports were done either. So we just have to figure out what your actual payroll was, and make sure that, and then go to each of these taxing authorities and see what they need for reports and get them reported and get everything all caught up and taken care of and get that liability. I think that the easiest way to do that from the Minnesota Department of Revenue standpoint is to approve a business power of attorney. I believe I included a copy in the packet to see what, and you can provide as little or as much. This is only for the Department of Revenue. And you can provide limited to withholding, just withholding. If you want, you can provide full authority just on the taxing components for Minnesota revenue. You can, sort of check and decide what makes the most sense. And then I have a form that can be signed once you decide, what you would feel comfortable with. But this is a matter that really time is of the essence. The $1,500 is what is paid, but the most recent bill is over 2,000, I want to say, or another 2268.71 is what the next liability is. Most of that is tax due, which you don't have that, so we just need to back up and figure out what you actually owe. There's filing penalties, deposit penalties, you're gonna end up with those, but if the quicker we get this done, then it's gonna stop the penalties and interest, and we're gonna get it taken care of. So really, there's sort of two things. One is this Department of Revenue power of attorney, and then the second one is to, and I don't know how you wanna do this, because I haven't found out exactly what we need to do with iSolved yet. If we have to pay a fee to access it, or if they will charge us to get our records. But likely, we don't want to wait until our next meeting for you to decide on that. So I don't know if you want to do a cap or have me check in with someone so that we can get those payroll records, because we're really dead in the water. There's nothing in the accounting system that shows anything related to payroll, so I don't have any way of documenting what happened in '23, so.
Do you have any ballpark? Up to $5,000 to iSolve to resolve this?
I think it's probably gonna be a couple $100.
But maybe up to 5,000, just so that we're clear of it, and then you'd
May
actually,
make you resubscribe.
you'd actually approve the actual payment then in the bills list at the next meeting. Or you'd approve it on the paid list in the next meeting, just so we can get this processed. You'd see what that actual number was.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking, like you say, keep the process rolling. Get this cleared up.
We don't like letters from the Department of Revenue.
No, not at all.
They have a lot of departments in the Department of Revenue.
Yeah, and I believe we're only talking withholding tax. That has been the issue. I don't think that there's any sales tax that was collected on your behalf. or set aside as a use tax. So I believe that we're okay there. And there's clearly no business income tax. So if you want to restrict it to just withholding, I think we'll be fine. If you're comfortable enough, just full authority and just let me do what I need to do in order to fix this, and then we'll be done with it. So whatever your wishes are.
Yeah, probably the authority, but then report back to the next meeting what you did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that a motion, Tom?
I was
Okay.
just gonna say board wishes.
Oh, yeah, I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
And just to be clear, the motion is,
You need up to five.
Authority up to $5,000 to
$5,000.
work with the vendor to clear this up.
Yep.
And then we need a motion for the power of attorney, so, can that be granted to you prior to when the minutes are approved?
Yes, as long as you approve it, then Ted can sign this, and then I can submit that.
Okay,
So, because you did take action at the meeting, you can sign it, and then we can keep moving on.
Tom, do you wanna amend your motion to include giving Mary the power of attorney and then spending up to $5,000, or you want two separate motions?
Okay. The power of attorney, how long would that would just for this itself?
Well, you can set an expiration date, so if you wanna set it for, 6 months from now or 3 months from now, so that we can get it all resolved, we have a date where it says the authority expires.
I would prefer an expiration date.
yeah, I
Okay.
agree. And if we say 3 months and we need an extension, we could extend it type of a thing.
Yep, absolutely.
So if you do March 31st, it would be the end of a quarter, it makes it nice and smooth when you're
Yep.
talking
I'll
about
amend the
taxes.
motion up to 5,000 and the power of attorney ending March 31st.
And then I'll amend to second my motion.
Alrighty. So, motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're on to 7C, Fardin Township housing parcels.
So I included that very significant housing study again, because I didn't know how you saved it and if it was, in the inner reaches of your file system. But I thought it was important because when we did go ahead and do this housing study, we always had in mind that there would be the potential to do some housing development in that northern tier of Hubbard County, which includes the 4 townships from Fardin, Rockwood, something, the 4 that are up there. And because, as you said in your tax hearing or tax conversation, the county's different in the northern part than the southern part, and we thought it was really important to capture that from a study perspective. So as we're thinking about housing moving forward, we have a little bit more nuance in what is the potential need for housing. And as you look through all of these reports, then you can see that that northern tier is highlighted and called out on what they are recommending or suggesting is the need. One of the things that I think was pretty interesting when you look at that northern tier townships is that they have a very significant outflow of workers. So their commuting patterns say that it's really a bedroom area, that the majority of people who live in those particular townships really are there for the amenities that they get for living there, and that employment is not necessarily the first reason that they live there. That area of the county is also predominantly owner-occupied. There's very little housing that is rental. And then the other thing that I found really, really intriguing If you want to make note of this, you can see it later. It's on page 81 of the study. But the northern tier also has, of all the called out groups, the highest part of, or highest number of mobile homes. While it's not the highest percentage, it's the highest number. And I think that that's interesting because everybody, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of these folks, I'm sure, acquired the land and then put a home on there so that they could live on it. And that's where they're still at, is on a mobile home. So there's 337 mobile homes in that northern tier area, where all of Hubbard County has 1,570. So there's really kind of a bunch of mobile homes in that part of the area, which I think can speak to a couple things, is as we think about our rehabilitation program, that is one area that we could potentially target. One of the eligible costs under the RLP is mobile home replacement. So that's one of the things that we could start looking at. But then the other thing is, as we're thinking about the property, tax forfeit property and potential development, it really does speak to home ownership is really the avenue to go for that, because that's really what the folks in that area are interested in, and that's really the highest impact and the most sellability for the program.
Now, we don't have, in the northern part, it's all on private property in a sense. We don't have mobile home parks on the north end.
Right, yep.
So it's kind of, and I can picture some, you know, normally that's where it starts off. They were able to afford the piece of property. They can't build a house, but let's put a mobile home on it with the good intentions of building eventually. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
And frankly, that's how I started. My husband and I acquired a property, or we came and lived at the family farm, and we started in a mobile home, and thankfully we were able to transition into a house. But there's a lot of folks who just can't for whatever reason. And so it is interesting as we're thinking about property and tax capacity. You know, mobile homes are taxed as personal property in a lot of instances, unless they're permanently affixed and then become real estate. So there's not a lot of tax capacity other than that land. And so that's something that, from an HRA perspective, is that if we can find ways to help folks replace those with more permanent housing options, that's good for them, but it's also good for the county.
Yeah, I would assume the well and septic, the driveway, all that stuff's already there. So,
Yeah, so it's a matter of finding appropriate replacement that makes some sense. And that's sort of a different project, but I just highlighted as I found it intriguing in the study.
And I'm just gonna add that Mojave currently has dollars for rehabilitation for mobile homes under the weatherization for Hubbard County. So if you know of people that need windows or, you know, furnaces or roofs or whatever, have them contact Mojave.
And we did submit the application for the RLP that we talked about last month. And assuming that we are successful in that application process, those resources would partner nicely with Mojave's resources, so we can expand the pool of funding that would be available to some of these households. So our conversation today was really to talk more about the housing parcels. And what I included is a map that I had drawn some time ago. And it was really a much larger idea than what we ended up with when you decided which parcels you would pull from the public auction. If you look at the upper triangle or quadrilateral or whatever it is, the half of that is what you agreed to pull as a test case. So about where that lot, or the line is for a potential road at lot 49 and 50 is about half. So if we look at that parcel, that 80 acres, you have a couple options. Is one, we could acquire it and then try and sell it just as it is for redevelopment. The other option is that you could start the process of looking at saying, you know, this design isn't all that bad. Maybe we should plat it with the expectation that, you know, it could be expanded. And we have X number of lots that are, that we can start with right now. A developer could still buy the whole thing, but the benefit of doing some of the platting is that you have a little bit more say in what ends up being there. So you don't have another 30-some mobile homes on a parcel, but that as part of the platting process, you could put some covenants in there that would really say, you know, these are the kinds of things that we think that this development is, and then you could choose to still sell it as a platted parcel or parcels, or you could independently sell them so that a builder could take one or two, or an independent household could take one or two, you know, one lot and build. But at this point, I think that because that 307th Avenue or street, whatever it is already developed, there's the potential where you can start building pretty quickly. As soon as the ground rethaws, you could actually start getting houses built here. So to do that, we should start the process, whatever that process is, so that we can capture some of that potential development in the spring. So that's why I'm bringing it here, is to really think about the direction that you might want to go with this. And then we can start looking at, you know, do you want to look at a plat like this that's already set to expand? Or no, let's just look at what it would look like if we did just the 80 acres that we set aside. Or, you know, no, we're gonna sell it. I could very easily see that on the east side of 307th, somebody could acquire that and just put one house instead of four. There's some wetland in there, and so there's only 5 lots that are really buildable on that section. And we're talking about then the other acres, there's about 40 on the other side that would be developable. These lots are sized based on your current requirements of minimum lot size with a well and septic. So they're 1,800 square feet, I think they are. And it was really, I just had asked for something very, very simple.
I like that, you know, platting it ahead of time, because that way you can put your covenants in there. But I wonder, does the ordinance still require the roads to be put in during the platting process being approved? I know it seemed like they did in the past when I was on the planning commission.
Yeah, and also.
That would be a pretty hefty expense right
Right.
up front then.
And at some of these too, since they are roads that would go loop all the way through, and if we only did the southern half, we would have to have a cul-de-sac or a hammer handle for people to turn around at the end of the road. And I think that also might, like, say on this, lots 10, 28, and 37, I'm not sure where the section line or whatever goes through those, if it does go through there.
This drawing would be redrawn relative to that parcel border at this point. This is just an illustration.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes it's easier to speak to having something to look at and react to.
Yeah.
And this was drawn, as I said, a long time ago when we were just sort of cooking this idea and looking around at parcels. Clearly, we'd have to delineate where that parcel line ends, make sure that we get the properties. We still would have the potential of aligning this in such a way that we can facilitate as much development as possible without actually incurring the costs of the road, as long as it does pass the planning commission. I wasn't aware of that. I thought that we could build it out sort of with time. I'll have to check
I
on
gotta
that if
check into it.
that's.
It seems like I
that's a route we
remember
have to go.
whenever
Okay.
private developer went to plat
I
a
think you're
property,
right,
they
Tom.
had to go and have the road in place.
Okay.
So I'm wondering how much into the weeds we want to get in. It seems like it would be much easier if we sold it to a developer. But could we develop some covenants prior to the development or the sale without actually having to go in and plat lots? Such as has to be stick-built.
Yeah, I would prefer not to get into the business of plating and everything like that.
Yeah, and then
If you
selling
can
off
send out an
individual
RFP
lots.
with certain requirements,
Yeah.
say on a 20 or a 40 of that, and see what happens, I would probably be in favor of that, but I don't want to get into subdividing and developing something on our own.
Yeah.
Because what we think might meet the needs might not be what the trend is actually going for.
That's why we included a copy of the housing study in here, because we do have some strong recommendations relative to this area. And both options are possible and could meet those needs. When we withheld this parcel and not the parcel to the north, we did so because we kind of want a proof of concept. So one of the ideas here is, how many houses do you want to see built before you're willing to invest in the other 80? Or would you ever be interested in being invested in the other 80? And what's the timeline that you'd like to see that done in? It's very likely that platting it gets us development sooner than selling it in a chunk, because we might wait a while before we find somebody willing to invest in that. Whereas if there are lots available, builders might buy and spec, owners may buy and have built. I think it's very likely that if we plat, we have some faster results. We could have results in 2025.
And then, my concern is that there is a couple of developments in this area that already have issues, trying to word this correctly. They're garbage houses,
Blight.
yeah. But I mean actual mountains of garbage. And with this, if we plotted it ourselves and had some covenants on it, we can control that. I guess and I think the neighboring property owners would also appreciate that, because I'm sure they want to have nice homes built.
So, two questions. First of all, are they stick-built houses that you're referring to? And secondly, we already see, we all know of places in Hubbard County that are a mess.
Yeah.
And, you know, Josh has worked on them with the county attorney's office, actually for years, I'm thinking of one of them, and nothing has been done. So how would we make sure that doesn't end up here?
Yeah, and the ones I'm thinking of are mobile homes.
So maybe it'd be even by putting stick-built,
Having some kind of
It might-
covenants.
yeah, it might help.
Good.
And I do agree with Jeff, is that if we do the plating, then it becomes more wide open, where just a household that's looking for a place, where if it's the whole 80, it is a different scale
It
of
is.
development.
Yeah, you're right.
And we're going to significantly limit the number of developers who are interested and capable of taking on this kind of a
Oh, sure.
project.
Yeah, a developer might buy a lot or two
Yeah.
and work on it,
Or 5.
Or 5.
But not probably 16.
28 or whatever.
Right.
So if we develop it, then who ends up handling the transaction work?
So, a couple things.
I'm
First,
thinking of staffing.
right. So we could have most of the transaction taken care of by title or something. We wouldn't necessarily have to do that. We could employ a real estate agent.
So you would have
that-
to market it.
So we wouldn't have to market it. We would look at, and Jeff and I have already been talking about the fact that we've got to create a website that will have information about all of the land that we have available. So those are some of the things that we do need to do if we would go down this path. The other thing that could be potentially intriguing is that Minnesota Housing is going to be letting a RFP shortly for Greater Minnesota Infrastructure Development. And they will be providing resources of X number of dollars per individual lot being developed. So the county HRA could entertain submitting an application that would help fund the road. It would be a little bit outside of what Minnesota Housing, I think, is envisioning. But that is something that we could look at as a part of this because it qualifies based on the information that I've received so far from Minnesota Housing. And right now, they have not indicated that they will include prevailing wage on the resulting houses, which is kind of an important thing. I will note that the city is likely to go after that pot as well, just for their own. But I think that they would not necessarily compete with each other. So I wouldn't feel bad about both organizations submitting to that pool because they are different projects and they have different merits. And so I don't think that they would compete poorly against each other. So that is an option that you could entertain, and because you own the land, that would be available for match. And then we could see whether or not the amount of resources, once we redraw this, we would get a sense or concept of what we need for a road, and then how much it's likely to cost. So.
You have an estimate on what it would be to plat 16 lots? Do you have any idea?
Not at this point. When we withheld the parcels, we knew that we had to get to an idea of that. When we withheld the parcels, we have to determine with Corey how, if they can be transferred to the HRA for housing development or whether they have to be purchased for housing development. In the end, we're gonna give you an interpretation of your authority, and the county board will have to determine how to sell or transmit those housing parcels. Then this board will have to determine, based on how much we end up having to pay for them, how much we can invest in them and what we ought to sell them for, individually or as a lump.
And this is something that a surveyor could do. So I've worked with Matt Murray in the past. He could do that work, and he's relatively reasonable. And then it would either be a contract with a civil engineer, or if your county engineer has the capacity to do that. I'm not quite sure how much we have the ability to ask the county engineer to design a road for us. But so we can look at those kinds of things. I don't think it's gonna be horribly expensive from professional services. And then it would be just the costs of the recording and, the Mylar and all of those kinds of things that are recorded. So from that perspective, it's not as expensive. The big key is whether or not we're gonna be able to acquire the parcel based on what your county board hat says, is if it qualifies under the housing and we get it for free, or if we have to acquire them at a cost, then that determines, okay, how do we make this all work within the scope of the project.
And if you do those two things, do we have the funds to actually plat it and build the road?
We very likely do if we believe they qualify to transmit for free. The parcel is about $80,000. I would imagine that professional services would be under 20, maybe 10-ish, to get us done through that. And then the development of a road that long is probably about equal to the cost of the purchase of the parcels.
Right.
I'm guessing in that ballpark of six figures or less. And if in that area we have 15 to 20 lots, 15 on the west side of the road and 5 over on the east side of the road, are they $4,000 a piece our cost, or are they $8,000 a piece our cost, right? So how many do you have to sell and at what price? The intention would very likely to be sell them at a discounted rate with the caveat and the terms that they be built out and have a home on them within 24 months.
And/or a residency requirement.
Residency requirement,
So
yep.
that, you have to maintain ownership of that parcel as your primary residence for 5 years, and then the discount is forgiven. If you sell at any time before that, then you have to pay back your discount. So, so there's two things that we can kind of do that. Number one is we can implement for speedier development, and then try and get some longevity as well from the households. So, the purpose of today was just to really help us figure out scope so that we know.
We're still probably gonna have to bring both options forward,
Yes,
what we
probably.
think, what we think they would look like.
Yeah,
But if we have any inkling that we wanna go with the plating, we would wanna get started soon after the first of the year so that we actually can have lots for sale this year. And if we don't plat and we own, then obviously we can list the whole thing for sale in 2025. So that would be the goal, would be to flip this into tax capacity as quickly as possible, one way or another. Two main avenues to get that done. And it may be a combination of that. We could split this 80 and treat one section one way and the other section the other way because it's on the other side of the road.
The one with the, yeah, that might make some sense.
Mr. Chair, I was just gonna say that Steve brought up a valid point, but after listening to Jeff and Mary, and even, cause it's right, it's gonna take a whole different kind of clientele to buy the whole thing. I could support doing some development, and then using a realtor, and so a lot of time and energy isn't spent on staffing.
we're not ready to do something right this minute. I just wanted direction so that I could, more adequately pull numbers together, and so that you can
Could we-
reflect on at our meeting in
Next year.
January. Oh my goodness, in next year.
We-
Wow.
Is it reasonable to have like professional services budget ideas, and even the possibility of if we go this way, this is what our professional services are gonna be in that amount of time, in a month's time? I can work with Corey to go through the statute and give you the options relative to, do you confer or do we have to buy? That line is another place where I'm gonna miss our former county attorney.
I was just thinking that.
As gray as that statute is,
Yes, it's very gray, and it's,
Jonathan would always say that wherever it's not specifically, where it does not say no, the board has authority. And he and I always agreed on that, so we'll have to obviously have a legal interpretation of whatever that we bring to you. But within 30 days, I think we can give you some numbers on both of those routes. Some numbers relative to development costs and an idea of what our acquisition cost options are. Then you'll have more information. But this is just making sure that we're keeping this moving, because our both of our hopes is that we sell some of this property in 2025 and turn it into tax capacity.
Recoup some of our
Yep.
money.
And one of the things that I do know about the statute is that it talks about having a plan in place. And I think that that's where this housing study really has paid for itself in helping us to formulate that plan based on the information that we already have. And so one could argue that what we're doing right now is creating that plan based on the external information that we've received. So
Has
it's
any,
helpful.
has any investigation been done as far as what sizes of lots are selling better than others? You know, is 2 1/4 too small? Is 5 too big? Is 4 the sweet spot? Is, you know, what's the most desirable? Because I drive past developments every day when I'm at work, and there's zero happening. And I don't know if it's the price, the location, or just the demand hasn't been there yet. But I just kind of want to get a feel for what's in demand now and what's going to recapture the funds as soon as possible if something like this moves forward.
Lower interest rates.
I don't have control over that. but-
Lower building costs.
Well, if we can sell them for $4,000 to $5,000 apiece, contingent on building within the next, and we're not worried about recouping the cost, we're worried about tax capacity development, and there's gonna be a sweet spot there. But 80,000 is this 2 1/4 is kind of it's bigger than they have to be. I think 80,000 square feet is what they have to be, which is what,
That's the minimum, yeah.
1.85 acres. So I couldn't tell you the difference between 1.8 and 2.25 acres if I were standing in the woods. But that's,
Or I wonder if a
to get-
mix of two different
to get
sizes
for
would be
the,
appealing.
yep, to get the bang for the buck, or to have the impact, or to the market. We have had conversations with developers who are very interested in this idea. We know people would buy lots and build houses at the right price.
Are all those other developments around the area full? Empty lots there, or they all got houses?
Well, I don't know that there's any recent developments.
I don't know that I don't know if there's lots for sale.
Yeah, I don't.
Developments, are you talking, where are their location? In Cass County?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the map and seeing lots,
There is
Yeah.
no houses.
Yeah.
Intersection
I'm
of,
sure they got houses on it.
34 and 11.
Yeah.
That one's half developed.
I don't recall
And
anything.
it's taking years.
Is all this wooded, so it has to be cleared?
It is more or less. It is more or less. It's been 6 months since I drove up there. It was sometime last winter, but we didn't have any snow, so I was able to drive through everything. And it is more or less, in much the same way as somebody has cleared a lot across the road from me, in a stand of Norway, right? And they bought it because that's what it is.
There's lots north of Nevis that have been there forever. I think 2 of them have sold. That's it. And they're small lots, much like these. But I don't know what their asking price is. I don't know.
The one thing to me that shouts success here is the vicinity to Bemidji.
Yeah.
Location
Yep.
real big.
I will tell you that I am familiar with one developer who bought some property in Eccles Township in Beltrami County, which is up north by the airport. Bought 40 acres and plotted it and is doing these tiny homes, 2-bedroom, 1-bath things. He has 10 pre-sold.
Really?
Yeah, he's
Oh,
selling
that's really
them.
interesting.
He's selling them between, some of them are less than 200,000 and some are like 220,000. And he's got 10 pre-sold
What's the square footage of,
and less than 1,000 square foot.
interesting?
Yeah.
Full sewer, everything's
Full
private?
everything, yeah, private, well and septics, but he's hitting that 200,000 and they're selling like hotcakes.
So is he
So-
building them with the potential of adding on easily?
No, his designs are not, I've talked a little bit about that expandable
Yep.
home concept. His designs are not, but they're still very nice homes. But they're clearly a starter home. So, you know, if we could get someone to think of that, and shift it or not, and, you know, we don't necessarily have to care if they're expandable. But, so that I do know, and I rely a little bit on his information because he is in that Bemidji market. So, and I would expect that his lots are fairly equidistant to the center of Bemidji from where ours are based on, you know, how the crow flies. So I think it's a good assessment. And in fact, he's one who might be interested in some of those lots.
And on slab then?
Slab on grade, mm-hmm, yep.
People would likely be very upset with us because I see lots for sale in that vicinity. 1.84 acres has got to be 80,000 square feet, right? 59.9. So if we turn around and sell them for half that with a development agreement, and that's the caveat, the full price is 59.9. If you build within 2 years, then this. If we own them, if we plat them, we have the ability to put those kinds of conditions on so they're developed in a way that's consistent with the neighbor's concerns or hopes. But yeah, that is right off the lake from Midge Lake. It's 1.84. This is right across the road from Midge Lake. Somebody wants 189, but that's only 1.65 acres.
That must be on the lake.
Nope,
Oh, wow.
I don't think so.
Wow,
Oh, it might be.
yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, so, there's really no action at this point, but Jeff and I will get together, based on this and have a lot more detail for
redrawn in
you to,
2030.
react to at our meeting in January.
You don't have to worry about that, maybe, I don't know.
Has anything been just brought up to the township
6 years.
about this activity?
We're gonna be at the township meeting in January.
Yes, we are.
Commissioner's problem.
We will have potentially this, and then I didn't make enough copies for everybody. I was going to do this, but I had our, and this is with regard to the commercial properties. I had the civil engineer just give us some scope information so that we can bring that to the township as well. From what I understand, they're more concerned about the industrial than they are about the housing. We'll find out on the 14th when we go, but that's kind of what I understand to be true. Is that a fair?
Yeah, they had the idea that there was gonna be some residential on the south of Highway 2. But on 500th Street, on the north side, there's homes, and on the south side, they figured there'd be more homes, but then you'd have the railroad tracks in your backyard. So my thought is, who would wanna build right next to a railroad track?
But we're not proposing any home development south of Highway 2.
Yeah, then that's what I told them, I said, we're looking at light industrial perhaps on that part, and then on the other, south of the tracks, then maybe, that might be wide open, let's call it that, heavy industrial, I don't know, whatever the term would be. Alrighty, so it's 7C, thank you, Mary, for presenting that. Number 8 would be the director's report.
So I was just going to mention that we did submit the application to Minnesota Housing for the RLP program. They are working on that. Minnesota Housing will be opening up soon. So they said, the match for the Housing Trust Fund. So Jeff and I will be watching for that application. They're already downplaying that they're going to have enough resources to do the initial ask and the additional match.
We're gonna get ours in first.
Yeah, so we have to do that. And I have been working with the task force on long-term affordability. It's primarily for affordable housing such as the Regency apartment that you own and the Cornerstone apartment, and how, especially when of late, Minnesota Housing has required that services be provided with that, and how there's a mismatch between services and housing funders being put, or housing operators being put in a position of doing things. Anyway, we're close to a recommendation, so next month I'll probably bring that, so that you can see what those draft, written up recommendations are on that program. And then, I do have the map that I had our civil engineer draw up for our visit with Fardin Township next month. I only printed enough for, Ted, so that he could be aware, because I believe he's going to that meeting, so that he could have a look at it. Clearly, this is just draft, it's just, again, for people to be able to respond to, because it's easier for people to look at things and then respond, rather than you sort of be this pie in the sky. And as I had said earlier, we are working on getting financials. I've been able to get to the point of balancing some of the bank accounts, and so we're moving along. So hopefully by next month, we'll have something real that you can actually look at, so.
Would it be possible for yourself or your staff, or Jeff perhaps, to provide us with some success stories of these developments that counties have initiated with plating and so forth?
Sure.
Well, successes and failures, just so we can, if we move forward, we have a good idea of how things roll, how things have worked for others or maybe not worked, so we don't have those same stumbling blocks. Maybe we can improve on the good and even
And
make it even better.
we might have to defer to some cities instead,
That-
because
yeah, that's
counties, to be perfectly frank, housing is really new for most counties. The HRAs that have been doing it have really been in that affordable or low-income housing and have not ventured beyond that. So we might have to look at some examples of cities'
Yeah.
projects. But yes, we can provide you with
Because
some
I know a guy who
examples.
just moved out to North Dakota. He said a lumber company bought this parcel of land, they subdivided it off, platted it, sold the lots at a discount only if they purchased their lumber from them, which, that's fine. But I just thought it was interesting that a company moved forward and did that just to get people to have economic activity, so.
For much the same reason as Mary mentioned, mostly cities are doing housing development, and it's unusual, but we have to, because the townships are not gonna have the capacity to do that, and we have 3 cities with populations under 500, and we've got one that's doing what they can. We have to advocate for everybody else, or nothing is going to happen. In much the same way the comment was made about the lodging tax. Not very many counties are involved in that. Most cities that have a lodging tax have a population of about half of this county's population. So it's a matter of population when we get into this. And we're sticking our toes in it because we believe you want us to provide housing for workforce, opportunity for development. And that growing a strong tax capacity is important. And yeah, we're breaking ground because not very many counties are doing it because they let it go to their cities.
And that's where I like where we pared it down from, 244 acres down to 80. So we can make sure that we don't set ourselves up for failure in one respect. But if this works out, we've already kind of got it
Yes.
plotted for the next step.
Yep.
So I like that.
I would agree with you, baby steps, because there's I don't know where I read this, but, whether it's TIF or other things, it's pretty easy to go to the taxpayer sometimes and say, hey, there's a return on investment here, but if your timelines are 30, 40 years out and you do too much of it, they wonder when the payoff's ever coming, because it just seems like you're putting it out all the time. So we gotta be very careful, because we're small, and just incrementally do it, have reasonable timelines so that we can get the return on investment in an appropriate amount of time, so you can show that this works.
So if you get a typical, so if we build 5 houses, get five new houses up there in 2 years, and build out 20 of them in 10 years. To me, that would seem like moving really quickly.
Yes.
That would be really good. And it, you know, it may never be that you get 20 out of 20 parcels. You may get 17. We may have situations where somebody builds a house and the parcel's there and they say, the heck with it, I'll buy that lot for $50,000 because I want some more elbow room. Okay, and we'd be okay with that. We wouldn't discount that lot unless they were gonna put a house on it. But if they wanted to pay a retail for it, you'd let them have a bigger lot. There's no reason not to allow options like that, and that might get to what's desirable. As Commissioner Karenan's question is, well, I'd really like 4 acres.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna discount the first one, the second one's gonna be at this rate, but we still are gonna hold you to constructing something within a reasonable time frame.
And the benefit of this is, we have recently added the other 3 letters on the back of our name, EDA. And this housing is really, I think, a window into making the industrial lots more marketable, because everybody's screaming for housing. And if we can go to a business and say, well, here you go, 3 miles away, here's housing, that puts us in a place that's very different than a lot of our competitors around the state or even nationally, so. That's all I have.
If that's it, a motion to adjourn?
I have to talk to you.
Second.
David, all those in favor, say aye. We are adjourned.